In a quiet coastal village in the Philippines, where tin roofs rattled during monsoon rains and electricity came and went without warning, two cries echoed from a small government hospital late one night. Nurses rushed back and forth, whispering prayers under their breath, because the ultrasound scans had already warned them this birth would not be ordinary. When the babies finally arrived, the room fell silent. Two baby girls were born conjoined, sharing a single lower body, their tiny chests rising and falling together as if they already knew they would have to live their lives in perfect harmony. Their mother, Maria Santos, was only 22 years old. She had grown up poor, selling vegetables by the roadside with her own mother. When the doctor placed the babies near her, Maria didn't scream or cry the way people expected. Instead, she reached out, touched both tiny heads, and whispered, "You are my miracles." The doctor gently explained the risks, the surgeries that might be possible one day, the long road of medical uncertainty. Maria nodded quietly, but in her heart, she made a decision that would shape everything that followed. No matter how the world saw her daughters, she would raise them to believe they were complete. The girls were named Angelica and Angela. From the beginning, they seemed to understand each other in ways no one could explain. When one cried, the other would calm almost instantly. When one laughed, the other's eyes sparkled with the same joy. Their father left when they were still infants, overwhelmed by fear and shame, leaving Maria alone with two children who needed twice the love and care, but also brought twice the light into her life. Money was always a struggle. Medical checkups meant long bus rides to the city, waiting hours in crowded hospitals, and returning home exhausted. Some neighbors were kind, bringing rice or used clothes. Others stared or whispered, treating the girls like a spectacle instead of children. But inside their small home, something magical was happening. Every evening, as the sun dipped into the sea, Maria would turn on an old radio. It barely worked, the sound crackling and fading, but music filled the room anyway. Filipino ballads, church hymns, and sometimes American songs drifted through the air. Angelica and Angela would lie on a thin mat, listening intently. Before they could even speak clearly, they began to hum together. Their voices blended so naturally that it sounded like one voice with two hearts behind it. By the time they were 5, singing had become their language. When they were happy, they sang. When they were scared, they sang. Music became their escape from curious stares and painful questions. At church, the priest noticed something extraordinary. During Sunday hymns, the entire congregation would turn around, trying to see where the sound was coming from. The twins' voices were pure, emotional, and perfectly synchronized, as if trained by professionals, even though they had never had a single lesson. Videos of them singing during church services began circulating online. At first, they were shared by relatives and friends. Then strangers started commenting. People from different countries wrote messages saying the twins' voices gave them chills, brought them to tears, or reminded them of hope they thought they had lost. Maria didn't fully understand social media, but she understood one thing clearly. Her daughters had a gift, and that gift deserved to be shared with the world. One evening, a message arrived that seemed impossible. A talent scout associated with an international singing competition had seen one of the videos. They wanted the twins to audition. Not just any audition, but on one of the biggest talent shows in the world, in front of judges whose names Maria had only heard whispered in awe. Simon Cowell was one of them. The idea felt like a dream too big to touch. They didn't have passports. They barely had money for food, let alone plane tickets. And there was the fear. What if the world laughed at them? What if people only saw their bodies and not their voices? Maria almost said no. That night, Angelica and Angela noticed their mother crying quietly. When they asked why, she told them the truth. The girls listened carefully, then Angelica said something that stopped Maria's heart. "Mama, we were born together for a reason. Maybe our reason is to sing together." With help from donations, church support, and strangers who believed in them, the impossible slowly became possible. Passports were issued. Flights were booked. For the first time in their lives, the twins left their village, then their country, and finally stepped onto American soil. Everything felt overwhelming. The cold air, the tall buildings, the language spoken so fast. But when they held hands, they felt safe. Backstage on audition day, nerves filled the room. Contestants warmed up, paced back and forth, or stared at the floor in silence. When Angelica and Angela were wheeled in, the room went quiet. Some people smiled warmly. Others didn't know where to look. The twins felt the weight of every glance, but they also felt something else. This was their moment. When their names were called, the audience murmured softly as they took the stage. The lights were blinding. The judges sat before them, unreadable. Simon Cowell leaned forward slightly, curious but cautious. He had seen many emotional stories before. He had learned to protect himself from being moved too easily. Maria watched from backstage, her hands shaking as she whispered prayers under her breath. Simon asked a simple question. Why did you come here today? Angela answered, her voice calm but emotional. We came to show the world that even if you were born different, you can still be whole. Simon nodded. And what will you be singing? Angelica smiled. A song about hope. The music began. From the first note, something changed in the room. Their voices rose together, soft at first, then stronger, wrapping around each other like they had done since birth. The harmony was flawless. The emotion was raw and honest. It wasn't just singing. It was a story of survival, pain, love, and unbreakable connection. The audience leaned forward, some covering their mouths, others already wiping tears. One judge closed her eyes completely, letting the sound wash over her. Simon's expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief, then to something deeper. His jaw tightened. His eyes glistened. Halfway through the song, the twins reached a high note that sent chills through the room. Their voices didn't strain. They soared. It was as if every hardship they had ever faced poured into that moment and transformed into something beautiful. When the final note faded, there was silence. 1 second. 2. Then the entire theater exploded. The audience stood, cheering, crying, applauding louder than anyone had that day. Maria collapsed backstage, overwhelmed by emotion. The judges struggled to speak. One praised their courage. Another praised their talent. But Simon remained quiet. He stood slowly, walked toward the stage, and looked directly at the twins. I've been doing this a long time, he said, his voice unusually soft. I've heard thousands of singers. What you just did wasn't just a performance. It was a reminder of why music matters. The twins held each other tighter. Simon continued, people will try to define you by what they see. But today, you defined yourselves by what we heard. Then, without another word, Simon turned and slammed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti rained down as the theater erupted. Angelica and Angela gasped, their hands flying to their mouths. Tears streamed down their faces as they laughed and cried at the same time. Maria ran onto the stage, wrapping her arms around both daughters, sobbing uncontrollably. In that moment, two girls once told they might not survive became symbols of hope watched by millions around the world. But the journey didn't end there. After the audition aired, the twins became an overnight sensation. News outlets shared their story. Celebrities sent messages of support. Doctors reached out offering free consultations. But with fame came pressure. Critics questioned whether they could handle the competition. Some accused the show of using their story for emotion. Late at night, Angelica and Angela sometimes lay awake, wondering if the world would still love them if they made one mistake. Before their next performance, disaster nearly struck. Angela caught a severe infection, sending them to the hospital. Doctors warned they might have to withdraw. Maria watched monitors beep in rhythm with her daughter's shared heartbeat, terrified of losing everything they had worked for. In the hospital room, Angelica began to sing softly, barely above a whisper. Angela joined in when she could. Nurses stopped in the hallway, listening. The doctor later said it was the most peaceful room in the hospital that night. Against the odds, Angela recovered just in time. On the night of their next performance, the twins returned to the stage stronger than ever. They sang not just for themselves, but for every person who had ever been told they were too different, too broken, or too unlikely to succeed. And once again, the world listened. Their story became more than a competition. It became a movement. A reminder that beauty can come from places we least expect, and that harmony is possible even when life forces us to share space we never chose. As the lights dimmed and the applause echoed, Angelica and Angela looked out at the audience, knowing their lives had changed forever. Not because they were conjoined. Not because they won a buzzer. But because they dared to let their voices be heard.